You really can't open a sports website or turn on a show right now without Shedeur Sanders' name popping up.
Right. It's everywhere.
The NFL draft is getting close, and everyone, probably you listening too, is just trying to figure out where he fits in this whole puzzle. We've been digging through the expert takes to try and cut through some of that noise.
Exactly. And we really zeroed in on a recent First Take segment. They properly dissected his draft stock. It gives a pretty good sense of what analysts are thinking.
And maybe more interestingly, where they kind of disagree.
Yeah, that too.
And the latest, well, maybe curveball, Mel Kiper Jr.'s updated mock draft had Sanders sliding a bit. Number 9, I think, to the Saints.
Yeah, number 9 to New Orleans. Now, this is important, though, that prediction. It came before the Giants went and got Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson signed up.
Right. So it just goes to show how fast these things move, leading up to the draft.
For sure.
But it really brings us to the core question, the thing we want to explore with you today. Is Shedeur Sanders really, truly a top 10 talent in this draft?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
That First Take discussion, it definitely highlighted some initial, let's say, reservations about putting Sanders quite that high.
Okay.
The thinking from some folks seems to be, look, the talent's there, obviously, but is he the guy who steps in day one and, carries a franchise straight to a championship? There's a question mark there for some.
Right. And they even name-dropped a couple of teams in that discussion, the Browns, the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
The suggestion was that those teams, picking where they are, they might be looking at other positions first, maybe like a top receiver or a beast on the D-line, something they see as a more immediate fix.
Right, filling a different hole.
So if Sanders has all this buzz, it does make you wonder, why would some of those early picking teams maybe hesitate? What are they seeing or not seeing?
Yeah, that hesitation, it tells you a lot about how different teams weigh things, how they evaluate quarterbacks specifically. One specific point that came up on the show, and it's been floating around, is about his throwing motion.
Ah, yes.
Some people have kind of labeled it a sidearm delivery. And, for some scouts or coaches, that term can carry a bit of a negative weight.
Right, like it's unconventional or maybe less reliable.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting was how quickly that label got challenged right there in the discussion.
It did, and I think that's a key distinction for listeners to get. The analyst jumped in to clarify that actually his typical throw, it's more of a classic, over-the-top motion.
On standard, yeah.
And to really hammer that point home, they brought up examples of QBs who've had massive success throwing from all sorts of angles. I mean, think about Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, yeah, the king of it.
He's famous for those crazy improvisational throws, right? Sometimes three-quarter, sometimes almost sidearm. Nobody's questioning his effectiveness.
Exactly. And they mentioned Aaron Rodgers, too, and Josh Allen. Both guys have their own unique ways of getting the ball out.
Mm-hmm.
So the takeaway really isn't about, the exact arm angle on every single throw. It's about the results, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The accuracy, the zip, can you put the ball where it needs to go consistently?
Yeah.
So this whole focus on a sidearm motion with Sanders, it kind of feels like maybe an oversimplification. Or maybe even just inaccurate for his base throw.
Okay, so maybe the mechanics debate is a bit of a red herring for some people. Let's shift gears then. Let's talk about something else that always comes up with Shedeur. His confidence. I mean, some might even call it swagger.
Oh, it's definitely noticeable.
And we heard about that quote, right? Him and, was it Cam Ward? Saying, teams that pass on them will regret it.
Yeah, both of them putting it out there.
Yeah.
And this adds, another layer of intrigue to how you evaluate him. The guys on First Take, they offered a pretty interesting way to look at it.
How?
Well, they weren't just dismissing it as, pure arrogance.
Yeah.
They were sort of framing it more as just deep self-belief. And they drew that clear line back to his dad, Dion.
Of course, prime time.
Whose confidence was, legendary.
Oh, absolutely. They even brought back that classic Dion quote, remember, about demanding so much money he'd need to be on layaway.
Ah, yeah, that one.
The point being, Dane's confidence wasn't just talk. He backed it up big time. So maybe that level of self-belief is just, in the DNA?
Seems like it. And it's apparently not just about the public stuff, the quotes. The discussion also mentioned reports coming out of the Colorado program.
Okay.
Saying that Shedeur is actually very open to collaboration. He wants input, wants to understand the why behind the plays, not just be told what to run.
Interesting. So less dictatorial, more partnership.
Yeah, exactly. And the point was made, look, his performance has kind of earned him that right to have that input, to be part of the conversation.
That makes sense. I mean, when you're the guy making plays, you expect a seat at the table. But there's always that question, isn't there? Is there a point where that confidence, maybe that swagger, could rub people the wrong way in an NFL locker room? Veterans,
That's
coaches.
always the tightrope, right, for any
Mhm.
really confident player. But the first take guys, they brought in a perspective from the defensive side of the ball, which I thought was cool.
Oh,
They basically argued that a certain level of confidence, maybe even a bit of an edge, it's actually pretty common among the really good NFL quarterbacks.
okay, yeah, I can see that.
They shared their own experiences playing against guys, saying that a quarterback who doesn't have that kind of energy, that self-assurance, that can almost be a sign of weakness to a defense.
Hmm.
Like maybe he doesn't truly believe he can make the play when it matters.
Huh. That's a really sharp insight. The idea that you need that inner belief, that fire to lead an offense. But obviously, as we said before, it all comes back to backing it up on the field.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Confidence without performance is just noise. And in Shedeur's case, well, there's definitely performance to point to. The conversation then shifted to his track record,
Yeah.
elevating the programs he's been at, Jackson State and then Colorado.
And you just can't argue with that impact, can you? I mean, like they said, Colorado football, it wasn't even on the national sports ticker, really, until Deion, Shedeur, and Travis Hunter showed up.
Totally off the map.
It just highlights what a massive impact they had. They brought real substance, real talent to a program that had been, let's be honest, struggling for a long, long time.
It wasn't just hype for a week or two. They won games. They generated genuine excitement. They completely changed how people saw that program.
Mm-hmm.
And the point was clearly made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Darren brought the spotlight, obviously, but it was the player's performance, especially Shedeur at QB, that actually fueled the whole thing.
Which led directly to one of the experts on that show stating pretty bluntly.
Yeah, saying he's absolutely worthy of a top 10 pick. Unequivocal. And he specifically mentioned liking that Saints projection at 9. That's a strong take, yeah, from someone who watches these guys constantly. The conversation then kind of pivoted to the money side of things,
Mm-hmm.
drafting a QB that high. Right, and that's an important piece of context now. The whole financial structure for top draft picks has changed,
How so?
Well, teams aren't automatically on the hook for like these massive $60 million guaranteed deals before a guy even takes a snap, not like it used to be.
Ah, okay. The rookie wage scale effect.
Exactly. So that shift, it does change the risk-reward calculation for teams thinking about a top 10 quarterback.
So, taking a flyer on Sanders in the top 10, it's now framed more as maybe a smart gamble, a calculated risk, they said, on a player who could potentially be a franchise guy.
Right. It's that ceiling, that potential payoff that makes him so tempting despite any questions.
But, with any high potential player, especially quarterback, there's always risk. Always.
Oh, for sure. And the first take discussion, they didn't ignore that. They brought up the history, the quarterbacks who looked amazing in college had all the hype.
And then just didn't pan out in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah. Names like Josh Rosen came up, Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah.
Just reminders that, the draft isn't an exact science.
Far from it. You can have the tools, the buzz, everything, but it doesn't always click at the next level.
But then they also flipped that coin, didn't they? They pointed to guys like Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not everyone saw him as a can't-miss top pick, but his team, Baltimore, they built their whole offense around his unique skills, and look at the success they've had.
Right. Shows the importance of fit and maybe believing in talent, even if it looks a little different.
Which really brings us right back around to that core question we started with, doesn't it? Does Shedeur Sanders have that critical mix? The mental toughness, the personal character for the pro game, and the physical tools to actually succeed in the NFL.
And the expert on First Take, he gave a pretty direct answer to that.
They did. It was simple, concise, he has all of that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. A short but pretty powerful endorsement, really.
Yeah.
Reflects their overall take based on the college tape, the leadership stuff, the character reports.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up for everyone listening. We've really dug into this whole debate around Shedeur Sanders' potential top 10 pick. We looked at that throwing motion scrutiny and how the sidearm thing seems, maybe overplayed.
Yeah, debunked it a bit.
We explored his confidence, which is undeniable, and that proven impact he's had turning programs around. And we touched on the money, the risks, the potential rewards of drafting any QB early.
And hopefully, we've given you listening a fuller picture of why there's so much chatter about Shedeur Sanders, why his draft spot is such a flashpoint right now.
Right.
We haven't, given a crystal ball answer on if he'll be top 10, but hopefully you've got a better handle now on all the different factors teams are weighing, the different perspectives out there, and just how subjective this whole draft evaluation thing can be.
Exactly. And it really leaves you with a thought, doesn't it? Thinking about Shedeur Sanders, his track record of lifting teams up, plus how the NFL money works now. What does his story, whether he succeeds wildly or struggles, what does that ultimately tell us about how we traditionally evaluate guys, how we project who's going to make it?
Mm-hmm. Makes you think hard about that balance, raw
Yeah.
talent versus those intangibles,
Mm,
leadership, confidence, belief, and then just finding the right place, the right team, the right system.
yeah. Definitely something to chew on as we get closer and closer to draft night.